You're listening to the ProgAxia podcast.
Hi everybody, it's Andy Phillips here and welcome to the ProgAxia podcast. As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, hi YouTube, I've got Alessandro and Agostino from, well, I've got to try and do this pronunciation, all right? La Maschera Di Cera, is that right?
La Maschera
you
Di Cera.
have to say if it was a K. Maschera Di Cera. The first is a K, the second is a C.
Right, brilliant. Because that's the one thing that really bugs me is I can never pronounce these things properly. So Maschera Di Cera, okay.
Right.
Which in English is the mask of wax or the wax mask.
Yes,
Right.
Wax mask. Okay, cool. Alessandro, you're lead vocalist and guitarist, and Agostino keyboard player. We've been having a little chat prior to the podcast. And I've been praising the keyboards to hell, and you got to praise the vocals to hell as well because they are really, really good. I've got to put my hands up straight away. I'm not really. I don't know too much about Italian progressive rock music, so I'm going to hope that you're going to give me a bit of an education on this as well. But before we go in, I want to talk about the latest album, S.E.I. album, which I think is absolutely superb. But could you give us a little bit of background of the band and just tell us a little bit about, you know, where it sort of came from, the little bit of history of the band?
Well, I leave the reply to Agostino because he was a collaborator of Fabio, who is the third member of the band, long before we joined in the Maschera Di Cera, and he had a real good past with Finisterre, which is still a great progressive band living. So no one better than him can tell you how we were born.
Well, about the birth of La Maschera Di Cera. Well, we collaborate also with Alessandro in a some theatrical settings in Genoa, our city, in mid-90s. Some Jesus Christ Superstar and some original rock opera like Merlin by Fabio Zuffanti, that is the third man of the La Maschera Di Cera. And Alessandro was also the vocalist. Well, in 1998, maybe, I joined Finisterre, that is a long time new prog Italian band from our city, and at that time we also had these side projects, and after a tour we made with Fabio and Finisterre in Mexico in 2001, I remember. Fabio had this idea because we had contact in Mexico with a lot of progressive fans who really loved that kind of Italian obscure prog bands, not the really mainstream one, but some closer with Van der Graaf Generator, you know, not similar to Yes or Genesis with the symphonic great openings, but with some obscure sounds. And we used some old material by Fabio. We had some compositions at the time in 2001, and we called some bandmates like Alessandro, Andrea Monetti on flute from Bologna, and a drummer who also collaborates with us at the time. And we started composing and recording the first album that was released in 2002, I remember. I don't know if I'm right. And it started like as a studio project, but soon became a real band, especially after the second album, because the first two albums were composed only by me and Fabio, all the material. But from the third album, with coming of the new drummer, Maurizio Di Tollo, we started composing everyone some tracks, and it became a real band also in the composition. Sorry for my English. I'm the typical Italian who, with poor English, but using a lot of hands, shaking and moving gestures. But my English is
himself, as you might see.
So that's the birth of La Maschera Di Cera. Alessandro, if you want to add something.
Yes, I will only add two things that are, I think, the main characters of the La Maschera Di Cera. We started with, I think, some of the hardest sound that were familiar with the Italian progressive band of the 70s, because our references were not Mediterranean roots or the Mediterranean styles. As Agostino said, we were not so dressed to lyrical or many strings arrangements or many melodic. Our main character was to be quite lunatic, quite psychedelic, and that was a characteristic of some a little of the Italian prog bands of the 70s. I could name Biglietto per l'Inferno as one of the most influences, and Van der Graaf too, yes, talking about foreign bands. But this was the fact that determined us not to have an electric guitar player. So the main solo parts were demanded to Agostino, mainly Agostino, and on the flute player, which was Andrea. And we decided not to have a guitar. In fact, in the first two albums, there's not even an acoustic guitar. There are no guitars at all. And that was a choice, really tough, that made us, I think, run some risks. But at the end, we find out that there was a real interest for that kind of hard sounds.
Yeah, because I think this thing about no guitar in there are people that just love guitars in the prog music.
Not only for the solo parts, but also the power chords are substituted by the fuzz bass and with overdrive, and this was an interesting mixture with overdrive organ and overdrive bass, who reached to cover the frequencies covered by traditionally by electric guitar, also in not only on solos but also in accompanying music.
Yes.
Yeah, because I was going to say that it's quite strange, because in the body of the music, not for solo specifically, but in the body of the music, you don't miss guitar because the bass is distorted or got some distortion on the bass, and you've got some distortion in the keyboards that fill that gap, so to speak. But this, I mean, you mentioned, Van der Graaf generating a lot of Van der Graaf was without guitar and had that quite a unique vibe to it. Is that what sort of stirred you to sort of maybe not put guitar into that?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, when we came up to the fourth album, when an electric guitar appeared for the first time, we were trying to express us differently. And so this was something that, like, experimenting and try something never tried before. But these are, as I could say, the two phases of La Maschera Di Cera. The one which was much harder and tough, and really like a punch sometimes, even if we often led to long instrumental moments in our suites, on in the tracks as well. And with an electric guitar, we discovered that we reached more a song dimension and not an experimenting dimension. And when we came to the last album, S.E.I., we decided not to have an electric guitar at all again. So I took only a few parts of acoustic guitar, just to make a sound a little bit different, and mainly because I'm particularly fond, as it might be heard by listening to the album, from folk influences.
Yeah, there's, because what struck me when I started playing this, I mean, I had a chat with you the other day, Alessandro, about I didn't really know too much about Italian prog, and it was only when we started talking that I realised that The S.E.I. album, I've got in my Spotify, I've got like the best progressive rock of 2020, you know, like I've got 2019, 2018, right the way back to 1969, you know. I just like collecting all the tracks and categorizing them and sort of cataloging them and things like that. But it wasn't until I was speaking to you and I suddenly realized that the S.E.I. album was one of those albums I had in my best of 2020. I didn't even realize that it was you guys, you know, when I started talking to you first, and it was quite a surprise because I don't really put a lot of Italian rock or progressive rock into my collections. I'm very much a sort of, you know, I've got my big favorite bands, you know, my Genesis and Pink Floyd's and my Rush and all that sort of stuff, you know, Yes and Van der Graaf and Gentle Giant and all those sort of things. So it's quite a surprise that I'd listened to it. I must have loved it and put it into my playlist. And it, as I say, it wasn't until we actually spoke and went, actually, I've got that in my playlist.
Well, by tasting La Maschera Di Cera, I think you have heard a real special part of the actual Italian progressive rock. There are a lot of bands really good playing in the last 20 years. I can name one that you could find sometimes equal to part of the sound of the Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and they are called Rock Project, and they have an astonishing keyboard play, one of the best I ever heard since the last 20 years, apart from Agostino, I mean. It sounded like you have discovered a really particular sound, but I think you have a real world to discover, even if sometimes bands are likely to reproduce old sounds, old atmospheres, old styles of composing, rather than starting to find something really new. Yeah, there are few bands that we could call experimental at this time.
Because I've got to tell you that since I first spoke to you, I started going in and listening to some of the older Italian prog that I probably hadn't heard before. And it really surprised me how much I loved it. I mean, there's lots of great albums. There's so many great albums. And I think there is a thing in English speaking countries that you don't really listen to a lot of Italian prog. I think there's been albums that, you know, like standout albums over the years, and, you know, people have sort of picked up on them and things like that. Because I've got a couple of mates of mine who do, I mean, they love Italian prog. And I think it's the language as well. You know, the actual sound is a very musical language anyway, Italian. Yeah. And it sort of just adds to the music, and to have that in Italian, it just adds to that texture as well. But what I've been doing, you know, again, since speaking to you the first time, was I've gone back into it and started listening to it and listened to quite a few different albums and just seeing what the textures are like and things like that. And it's been a real eye-opener for me, you know, and I think what's sort of happened is that because I've started listening to it, and although there's initial pushback because you don't know what the lyrics are about, you know, there's I think that's the one of the biggest problems is that, you know, I don't know what the song's about, you know, because I don't know what the words are.
That's I think the reason why many bands of the 70s, mainly PFM and Banco, had to release English versions of their albums.
Yeah,
and they were very famous there. But I think that this was something owed to the chance of climbing up borders and going through UK and Europe, because there's one thing to say about Italian language. It has a lot of long words, very long words. So it is rather difficult to adapt them to the beat.
Sure.
And the shortness made sometimes of the beats, of the measure, of the rhythm of the sung parts. And for instance, I find myself more perfectly at my ease with writing in English even if it's not my language, because I find quite immediately the words they use that renders the rhythmic and even the sound.
Yeah. Because what I was going to say was that, you know, it took me a very, very short space of time to, you know, get used to it, get into it, and then you sort of put it to one side. But one thing I did was with the S.E.I. album, that very first track, which is in English, The Millennial Time.
Yes.
I actually put the lyrics into a translator online. Just to wrap my head around what the track was actually about, and it's really deep. You know, the lyrics are really good. They're probably not as good in written English, you know, especially translating through a computer. But you know, just going through the actual lyrics, they're very, very deep, and I'm just wondering if it does translate, because the feeling you get from lyrics, you know, the way lyrics sort of sit within a track, it's like when you listen to like Genesis or anything like that, you know, you hear a story and a rhythm to it all. I know that it's not going to translate, you know, so well in English, but it gave me a really good idea of what it was, and it sort of helped me to appreciate the music. But as I say, it didn't take long for me to just put the language barrier, I guess, to one side, and then just start really enjoying the music, because the music is fantastic. And one of the things that I wanted to sort of try and get a lot of English-speaking progressive rock fans to do is just give it a bloody go, because, you know, if you're not listening to Italian prog, then you are missing out on a huge raft of some fantastic music. And that's why, I mean, when I put the S.E.I. album on, when I first listened to it, I listened to, it's a 22-minute track, the very first one, Millennial Time, first track, 22 minutes. Well done, guys. Love 22 minutes. But it's when I first heard it, you know, it's okay, you know, I like all the bits and pieces in it and all that sort of thing. But by the third listening to it, it's like it's sort of becoming a track that I know really well. You know, it's a really well written, great piece of work, and it doesn't sound like 22 minutes long. You know, it sounds like, you know, sort of an 8-10 minute track. You know, it just sort of flies by, which is, to me, is a good test, if you know what I mean. So tell us a little bit about
when we started to work at S.E.I. It started quite as a joke, but then become serious, having in mind the same sequence of Close to the Edge.
Right.
So
I get
a suite on the A side and 2 tracks on the B side.
Right. Brilliant.
And so we decided that everyone should write one track, one by me, one by Alessandro, and one by Fabio, and that's what happened. Lyrics and music. Then we arranged it together, and that was our Close to the Edge, with green cover, like Close to the Edge. Yes. And we did the green vinyl. Only a joke,
Brilliant.
but.
Because the music isn't sort of yes-like. I mean, there's you know, when you listen to music, you sort of think, oh, that's got a little bit of a vibe of this and a little bit of vibe of that. I can hear things like a little bit of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, a little bit of Van der Graaf, a little bit of Pink Floyd sitting in there, you know, sort of floating in sections and things like that. It doesn't sound like those bands, but you know what I mean? It's like, it just reminds me of that sort of vibe, you know. This is why I say that, you know, people have got to listen to it, because it is really, really good music. But let's just go into the S.E.I. album, because I want to sort of get people to sort of just have a listen to that one, at least start listening to that, and then get into the rest of the stuff. So tell us a little bit more about, apart from the sort of the structure, a little bit more about that S.E.I. album, what it's about, and how it, you know, what's the vibe of the album.
Well, the album was born about something like a concept. It is not, the tracks are not linked by something particular, but so we had even freedom to choose what the lyric was to be about. And as you can see, the Millennium Chime, the suite on the A side, is a story, easy to understand and to visualize. The track I wrote, Cerchio del Comando, the command circle, as you might call it, is something more and more ironical. It is not so clear. It is very sarcasm. And the third track, the one from Agostino, Vacuo Senso, is something even more, as I can see, hermetical. So I can say that lyric came by chance. And it was something that we had in our minds and in our soul and in our thoughts at that time. I was particularly angry with the power shift of many people, started from politics and into many other things. And so I think music came surely first, and then we felt what was like the music to talk about.
Yeah.
And then we joined with two very special friends that collaborated with Fabio some years before. And one is the flute player, whom I play with in Delirium, which is one of the historical prog band of Italy.
Yeah.
We are celebrating now our 50th anniversary.
Wow.
And another was the drum player, which is really good. It is Paolo Tixi, who worked with Fabio 5 or 6 years ago, and still he's going to work. And so we decided, and then there were 3 rather than 5 as we were before. And that's all how it came up.
Because I mean, there's beautiful interplay between the sort of the keyboards, the flutes, and things like that. And is there sax in there as well?
Yes, sure.
Yeah,
because Martin, who is English, because he was born. Martin is English. He was born on Sutton Coldfield in the Birmingham district.
Yeah.
And he moved to Italy at 1974, and he has remained here throughout all these years. And I can say he is an Italian citizen by now. And he is a fantastic saxophone player.
Yeah, I mean, there's
one of the best flutists I know, but also a great sax player.
Yeah, there's some beautiful sections with the sax and the flutes. So it really does complement the whole music. And it's one of the things that struck me. There's bits in it which sound quite sort of almost like jazz inspired sections in there as well, which just got so many different aspects to it, So if you sort of like that heavy sort of keyboard, the Hammond organs and that sort of stuff, there's some of that. There's a mellotron with some sax over it, and there's some flute stuff, and I think it's just a wonderful album. Where's this going now? What's the next step for you guys?
Oh, well, hard to say.
Good question. Good question.
We're still sort of struggling, coming out of lockdown and things like that.
The wish chance would be playing live, because you can guess that we all really and deeply want to. It's not that easy, because well, I can say venues are reopening in Italy, or at least it seems so. But they are moving very weirdly. They are trying to collect many bands, and in order to get more audience. But you can see that relating on the laws in Italy, there can't be more than a specific audience, and so many places can't receive more than 100, 150 people. And so the promoters are trying to marry this concept with having a lot of bands, but this means that the bands have only a short time to perform.
Yeah.
There is a very famous festival in Italy, which is Verona. It takes place on the first weekend in September, and this time they're going to have only Italian bands, not foreign bands, as was their usual plan. But it's quite strange to see how they have settled the old things. And even in summer, there are not so many venues. Italy is very poor about venues. There are not so many places to go for progressive music.
We played abroad, very more abroad than in Italy in our career.
Yeah.
Great festival in Europe or in the USA, and it's easier to play our music abroad. It's Nemo Profeta in Patria phrase.
No, because I was saying our mutual friend Alessandro Mark, who's the promoter or the organizer of Prog for Piet, which was meant to be, was it last weekend? It was meant to be, and had to put it back because of the COVID restrictions.
I've sadly seen that it's been postponed.
Yeah, it's been postponed. Yeah, I mean, we've got the tickets. We're still going, that sort of thing. But we're just hoping it's going to be on because there's so much going on at the moment, and so many things sort of getting postponed, put off, and all that sort of thing. But Prog for Piet is still on at the moment, so if you haven't got your tickets, get your tickets.
That's great. That's great, and I saw two bands really interesting.
Yeah, there's some great bands going to be on that weekend, so really looking forward to that. But listen, guys, we've got to our end of our podcast here. It's been absolutely fantastic talking to you guys, and we'll definitely have you guys on again.
Thank you so much, Andy.
Let's hope you. I mean, are you writing anything else at the moment?
Oh well, we started to think that everyone can write something new and put it aside. And maybe next autumn start to work together to build a new album. Maybe. Why not?
Well, I look forward to hearing it. Guys, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thanks
everyone. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.